For 3 long years, the message of Islam grew in total silence. Inside the hidden walls of the House of Arqam, a small brotherhood of 40 believers had formed, bound together by a radical new faith. They prayed in secret valleys, hid their conversion from their closest family members, and guarded their identities with their lives. But a message sent to transform the entire world couldn't stay hidden in the shadows forever. The period of isolation was drawing to a close, and the city of Mecca was about to be shaken to its core. The turning point arrived when a new revelation descended upon the Prophet Muhammad. The command from the heavens was clear, heavy, and uncompromising, and warn your closest kindred. Shortly after, another verse followed, expanding the order to the entire city. Proclaim what you have been commanded and turn away from the polytheists. The time for whispering in secret rooms was over. The Prophet was being commanded to stand before the absolute rulers of Mecca, the fierce, proud leaders of the Quraysh tribe, and openly challenge centuries of their ancestral traditions. The whisper was about to become a roar. To understand the immense courage this required, you must understand how the Quraysh viewed their city. Mecca was the religious, political, and economic capital of Western Arabia. Their entire wealth, power, and prestige rested completely on the 360 idols housed within the Kaaba. To the Quraysh, these idols were not just religious symbols, they were a massive business. Tribes from all over the desert traveled to Mecca for pilgrimage, spending enormous amounts of gold in the local markets. To openly preach against those idols wasn't just a religious disagreement. To the ruling elite, it was an act of economic treason and social revolution. To speak out meant inviting instant hostility, social boycott, and danger. Knowing the heavy stakes, the Prophet Muhammad walked to the center of Mecca and began to climb the rocky, steep slopes of Mount Safa. This was the public square of the city, the historical place where people gathered for major emergency announcements. Once he reached the summit, he looked down at the bustling city below, gathered his breath, and called out into the open air with a voice that echoed through the valley. Ya Sabaha. This specific phrase was a traditional Arabian danger cry. In the harsh desert, it was only used when an invading army was spotted on the horizon, about to launch a surprise attack on a city at dawn. Hearing the urgent cry resound through the mountain cliffs, the merchants dropped their scales, the citizens poured out of their homes, and the leaders of every prominent clan rushed to the foot of the mountain to see what catastrophic danger was approaching. Within minutes, a massive crowd gathered at the base of Mount Safa, looking up at the man they had known for 40 years as Al-Amin, the trustworthy. Standing on the high rocks, looking down at the assembly of his own people, his uncles, his neighbors, and his future enemies, the Prophet spoke to them with absolute clarity. Before delivering the message, he asked a simple, powerful question to establish his credibility. If I were to tell you that there is an army behind this mountain, waiting in the valley to launch a surprise attack on you, would you believe me? Without a single second of hesitation, the crowd called back in unison, "Yes, we have never found you lying. You are the trustworthy one." The psychological trap was set. Every single person in that crowd had just universally admitted that his honesty was absolute, flawless, and beyond question. With the entire crowd listening intently, the Prophet delivered the strike. "Then know that I am a warner to you, sent before a severe punishment. Save yourselves from the fire, for I cannot protect you against the decree of God." He openly proclaimed the absolute oneness of God, called for the immediate destruction of the stone idols, and demanded an end to the oppression of the poor, the orphans, and the weak. He told them that their lineages, their wealth, and their tribal status meant nothing to the creator of the universe. Only their righteousness mattered. The silence that fell over the crowd was suffocating. The sheer shock of his words paralyzed the assembly. The man they trusted implicitly had just shattered their entire worldview, their traditions, and their economy in a single sentence. The heavy silence was abruptly broken by a harsh, angry voice. It came from the Prophet's own flesh and blood, his uncle, Abu Lahab. Furious that his nephew was publicly threatening the status quo and the financial interests of the Quraysh elite, Abu Lahab stood up, dusted the dirt from his hands, and shouted aggressively, "Taban lak! May you perish for the rest of this day. Is this why you have gathered us?" Abu Lahab's public rejection broke the tension, and the crowd began to disperse, muttering in anger, confusion, and disbelief. The open call had ended in immediate, bitter hostility from his own family. Shortly after this event, a powerful response descended from the heavens, forever recording this moment in the Quran in Surah Al-Masad. May the hands of Abu Lahab perish and he himself perish. His wealth will not avail him or that which he gained. Following the declaration on Mount Safa, the atmosphere in Mecca shifted from confusion to active political resistance. The leaders of the Quraysh, realizing the message was gaining ground among the youth and the vulnerable, decided to launch a campaign to suppress it. They did not resort to open violence immediately. Instead, they turned to psychological warfare, mockery, and intense political pressure. Whenever the Prophet would walk past the Kaaba to recite the Quran, the elite would mock him openly, whispering that he was a sorcerer, a poet, or a man possessed. They tried to build a wall of noise around the divine words, instructing the citizens of Mecca to clap, shout, and whistle whenever the Quran was read aloud, hoping to drown out its linguistic beauty. When mockery failed to halt the growth of the community, the leaders of Mecca changed their tactics. They realized that the Prophet's primary defense was the tribal protection of his uncle, Abu Talib, who, despite not accepting Islam himself, refused to abandon his nephew. A delegation of the most powerful men in Mecca, including Utbah ibn Rabi'ah, marched to the house of Abu Talib. They offered a series of compromises and immense bribes, hoping to put an end to the preaching without starting a tribal war. They told Abu Talib, "If your nephew wants wealth, we will collect enough gold to make him the richest man among us. If he wants honor and status, we will make him our leader and king. If he is afflicted by a medical condition, we will spend all our fortunes to find the best healers in the land. All we ask is that he ceases criticizing our ancestral gods and stops dividing our society." Abu Talib, feeling the immense weight of the entire city turning against his clan, called the Prophet to his side and explained the demands of the Quraysh. He looked at his nephew and pleaded with him, saying, "O my nephew, spare me and spare yourself, and do not put a burden on me that I cannot bear." Imagine the gravity of this moment. The Prophet stood to lose the only physical protection keeping him safe in Mecca. If his uncle stepped aside, his life would be forfeit. Yet his conviction remained entirely unshaken. He looked at his uncle with tears in his eyes and delivered a legendary response that defined the unyielding nature of his mission. "O my uncle, by God, if they were to place the sun in my right hand and the moon in my left hand, to make me abandon this cause, I would never abandon it until God makes it victorious, or I perish in the attempt. Abu Talib, deeply moved by the absolute sincerity and unwavering courage of his nephew, wept. He looked at Muhammad and replied, "Go, my nephew, and say whatever you wish. By God, I will never hand you over to them for any reason." The negotiations had failed. The bribes had been rejected. The Quraysh elite realized that no amount of gold, power, or political leverage could break the spirit of the message. The realization set in that this was a deep spiritual revolution that could not be bought or bargained with. The era of peaceful resistance and debate was officially over. Having exhausted their political options, the rulers of Mecca turned toward a dark and brutal path. The stage was now set for the era of physical persecution, boycotts, and torture, a period that would test the faith of the early Muslims in the scorching sands of the desert, forcing them to choose between their lives and their loyalty to the one true God. The public struggle had begun.